Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing really well. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my updated makeup inventory. I did my first makeup inventory this time last year in the middle of November last year, and I'm really excited to be sharing with you some updated numbers and counts on products that I own in my makeup collection. Now, I did mention recently that I am going to be doing a no buy, so hopefully these numbers do not increase when I come back and share them with you next year. I'm hoping to actually do this video again in May, so in 6 months time, so that I can be a little bit more diligent in checking in with myself more frequently than once every 12 months. But in any case, hopefully these numbers are going to go down. I don't have any predetermined goal numbers because I really don't know what a realistic makeup collection for me looks like. I know some people will say, I have 10 eyeshadow palettes and I'd really like that to be 8. Well, I don't really know what would be the ideal number for me because where my makeup collection is right now, I do feel like maybe is a little bit more than I would like it to be. However, it does work for me and I do feel like I'm able to get use out of the things that I do own, and I really do love on the products that I own. So I just really wouldn't want to see a lot of these categories increase, I suppose, is how I want to preface this video. But in any case, I know I'm rambly already from the start. We have a lot to talk about, so why don't I just hop on into sharing with you guys all of my numbers. I will also share on the screen pictures of each category so that you can see all of the specific products that I do have within that category, and hopefully you can get to know my makeup collection a little bit better. So let's kick it off with primers, and for whatever reason, I am a little bit of a primer junkie. I know it's one of the more boring sorts of makeup products simply because they're not an item that you really see on the complexion, but I do really think that they make a difference for me personally in terms of the look and the longevity and just the way that my makeup sits on my skin. So I love trying out new primers. It's like one of my favorite things, oddly enough, and I've been really holding back on the amount of primers I bring into my life this year. I have really tried my best to make sure I don't acquire so many because that number last year was 13 and this year it still stands at 13. I mean, I know I said I wasn't going to be setting goals, but under 10 would be more realistic for me with this category, or to bring in more minis or even just sample sizes. So as you can see in the picture of what my current collection looks like, I have 2 minis of the Milk Makeup Hydro Grip, which I count each as individual primers simply because I want to hold myself accountable with that kind of thing. So you'll see I have sample packs and blister packs of actual just like deluxe size samples or even just regular sample sizes of products, and I consider them individual products in my collection because I really want to ensure that I do get use out of them and I hold myself accountable to actually use them up and not just like keep acquiring more and more samples and just writing them off as not being products in my inventory. I don't know. I hope that made sense. I hope that was clear, but yes, you can see there's some like deluxe size samples and some minis, and each of those count as their own individual product in my collection. So if next year I focus on working on maybe getting out some of the minis in my collection, that number could definitely easily be under 10, and that just seems so much more realistic and attainable, and it makes more sense for me having one face and wearing makeup like 4 or 5 days a week. So I would like to see that a little bit lower, but I'm happy to see the number has not increased since last year. Next up is Tinted Moisturizers, and I had 3 in 2019. I remember reflecting on this category and saying, I don't care, I would love to see this number go up. I don't mind whatsoever because I do prefer tinted moisturizer. I love the way it looks on my skin, the way it feels on my skin. It's just been my preference as of late, even still 1 year later. But I still only have 3 tinted moisturizers in my collection, one of which is new. 2 of them I actually am close to finishing up both of them, and then I recently did just finish up one other. So I have 3 still. I'm totally cool with that number. I don't really want to see that increase, quite honestly, even though last year I said it wouldn't be a problem, because I do have foundations that I could mix with my primers and turn them into something more like a tinted moisturizer. So I don't need to see that number increase. Once I finish up the one that's best suited to my skin for summertime. Maybe next year I'll replace it, but we'll see when the time comes if that's something that I really think is necessary. And speaking of foundations, last year for 2019, I had 11 foundations in my collection. This year, I'm really proud to say I only have 5 foundations. I know that last year I did have 3 of the 11 as blister packs, so even though it was a sample that contained 3 different individual shades of one foundation type, I did consider them each their own foundation because I could only really work on using them all independently. So I consider them each one. So I worked my way through that actually very recently in order to bring this number right down. And I have 5 full-size foundations in my collection. And last year I was like, I don't mind having 11 foundations if I have more tinted moisturizers. I feel like that's silly. Now I have only 8 base products, and that seems like more than enough considering I can kind of mix them together, customize them, turn them into the right shade, turn them into the right finish, all that kind of stuff using primers, concealers, tinted moisturizer, and foundation. So I'm really happy to see that number be 5. Eventually, I'm sure it will be even lower because I just don't really reach for my foundations anymore. So to have that at like 3 would not be any sort of issue for me. Next up is concealer and color corrector. I lumped the 2 together because last year I did have only 1 color corrector. So I had 10 products in that category. And now I'm really happy to say that I have 8 products in that category, one of which is still a color corrector. I have a green color corrector, which I really don't tend to use whatsoever. I'm honestly considering decluttering it because I just don't tend to reach for it, even though I do get like red, angry acne. I just don't really care to take the time to color correct, and so I'm not sure. It might be something that I end up decluttering. As it stands right now, I have 8 products in that category. I have so many different finishes and shades of concealers. I have way more than one face could really need. Like 7 concealers is quite a lot for me. And I really didn't work my way through many concealers this year because I've been focusing on my Too Faced Born This Way concealer, and I'm still not done it. So unfortunately, that number could have potentially gone down if I had maybe reprioritized getting use out of different concealers from my collection, but I foresee that number definitely going down next year as long as I rotate through my concealers a little bit more, maybe use the older ones a little bit to completion. But all in all, I really don't think that having 8 color correctors or concealers is a bad number whatsoever. That actually is still very low in my opinion, and really something that I'm really happy to see go down already this year, but I foresee next year that number being even lower than it is currently. And then for loose powder, in 2019, I had 8 loose powders in my collection, and I knew that that was pretty excessive at the time. But I loved loose powder, especially when I liked a more full coverage look, when I had more active acne on my face and I felt like I could not make my foundation just look nice and smooth and stay in place. I really had a lot of issues with severe texture, and I just hated the way that my skin looks, so I really like to cake product on. And so I've been slowly trying to work my way through some of my loose powders, but it's just not my preference anymore. So I have gone down only 2 loose powders. So for 2020, now I have 6 loose powders in my collection, one of which is like an SPF loose powder. So I don't know, I figured I'd count it. It's not really a skincare product. It really is more of a makeup product in my opinion. And then I also included a mini of the Bare Minerals Mineral Veil in that as well. And I think that that's something I can totally work my way through relatively quickly if I do kind of prioritize it. So that number will definitely decrease. I really only use loose powder to set under my eyes, and I do have a couple in my collection right now that I don't love underneath my eyes, so I'd love to just get them used up eventually and out of my collection, and then I can just really hold on to the ones that I do prefer. The next category is pressed powder, and last year I had 3 pressed powders. I was totally okay with that number, and for 2020 I still have the exact same 3, pressed powders. So I've been slowly making some progress on them, but I did try to focus on 2 of those in different project pans this year and have hardly made any sort of progress. So that might end up being the exact same number next year with the exact same products, who knows. I like the 3 that I have. I think that they are good and they function well, but it's just not a step that I deem necessary or essential very often. So that's why that number and the actual products in it are the exact same as last year. So let's talk setting sprays. Last year I had 5 setting sprays, and I'm really happy to say I still only have 5 setting sprays. I don't think that they're all the same. Actually, I do think that 2 of them maybe are different, or maybe even 3 are new. But setting spray is something that I absolutely love. I love that ritual of like locking everything in place and making everything look really cohesive with the setting spray. And I love that I do have a variety of different setting sprays that offer different things. Like some are more fixing to help my makeup longevity, and others are more hydrating to make my skin just look a little bit more plump and happy and perky. So 5 setting sprays is totally fine with me. If that number went down, totally cool as well, but I don't see myself needing any more than 5 setting sprays in my life at any given time, and so 5 is great. Next up, let's talk bronzer. Last year I had 8 bronzers in my collection, and that is something that I was like pretty shocked to see that I only had 8, because I love bronzer. I love the way the bronzer looks, and I just feel like a makeup look isn't complete for me without bronzer. And even though last year I wouldn't have minded seeing that number increase, I'm really happy to say that this year I have kept that number down, actually lower, and I'm at 7 bronzers, one of which actually is a contour. And that product, I personally, I don't know, I don't really feel like it really should be considered in the bronzer collection or category, but last year I considered it in my bronzers category, so I'm just gonna keep it in the same place just to not kind of move around numbers or fudge around numbers. I want to keep things in the same category that I had them in the year prior. So 7 bronzers / contours in my life, that's not a bad number. I'm really happy with that, and I don't imagine that really increasing anytime soon, but I do love bronzer, and there are always bronzers on my wish list for sure. Next would be liquid and cream bronzer, and last year I had only 2, and this year I have the exact same 2 products, so I have not increased that number, which I'm really happy to see. I still do consider them both to be cream bronzers like I did last year, and I'm happy to see that that number has not changed. I'm really satisfied with those 2 products being my cream liquid bronzer options. One of which was actually a cream bronzer, the other was actually a like deeper concealer, which I consider to be a cream bronzer because I do not use it as an actual concealer. Next up is blush, and last year I had 8 blushes in my collection, so individual pans of blush in my collection. 2 of which I remember were like a pressed powder sample from Buxom, and I'm so happy that I recently finished those off because that is so silly to hold on to for so long, those little tiny sample packs. But in any case, I'm really happy to say that now in 2020, my number is down to 7 because I did bring in 2 new blushes this year actually, but I believe I did declutter a few, and like I said, I finished off those little pressed samples. I haven't finished any blushes this year that I know of. No, I have not. I've definitely not. I was focusing for 6 months on one single blush and finally hit pan on it, but I have not finished up any blushes this year, and I have brought in 2 new ones, but I'm really happy to say that my number is still down to 7. I don't see that number needing to increase in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I have more blushes than I really do need. A lot of those shades are quite comparable to one another, so I don't really see the need to increase that number yet or anytime soon, especially considering that I do have liquid and cream blushes as an option as well. So let's talk about that next. Last year I had 4 liquid or cream style blushes, rather, not brushes, blushes. And this year I also have 4. The reason why it actually is up to 4 this year now is because I did declutter one at the beginning of this year, and then my birthday is upcoming, so I just got the Milk Mini, well, I ordered it, but I don't have it yet in my possession, but the mini blush that came in the birthday gift for this year. So it's up to 4, but 2 of which are actually just minis, which is great. I can hopefully work my way through those. eventually. And yeah, I'm really happy to see that number not increase. Now, I do have a new category for this year that I probably should have included last year, which is highlighter palettes. Last year, I didn't count it because I had, I think, only one highlighter palette in my collection. And so I just counted the individual pans of highlighter with my highlighter count, which is totally fine. I'm actually going to tell you the numbers both ways, but I do have 3 highlighter palettes now. Last year I only had 1, so that's why I didn't count it. But now having 3, I figured I could make my own category for it. I do not want that to increase. I'd like to see those same 3 highlighter palettes just remain exactly as they are. I don't want to add any more highlighter palettes or highlighters in general to my collection. So there are 12 different individual pans of highlighter between those 3 palettes. And for individual pans of highlighter outside of those palettes, so in other face palettes or on their own independently packaged pans of highlighter, I have 14 highlighters. Last year that number was 25, but hear me out. The reason why it's 14 now is because I took away the 12 that were in the palettes. So I actually have 26 highlighters. The number has gone up since last year. And I've used up 2 highlighters this year so far. Maybe I'll have 3 done by the end of this year, but I've used up 2 highlighters. I'm still at 26 pans of highlighter in my collection after having 25 last year. And I am really disappointed with myself seeing that number increase instead of decrease. 26 individual pans of highlighter is an absurd amount of highlighter. I did receive one of the highlighter palettes in PR, and that was the Shared Planet one. And then the other one that I received was a gift with purchase through an e.l.f. purchase, and I didn't really see either of those coming into my life. But yeah, I still have 26 individual pans of highlighter, and that's a lot. That's a lot of highlighter for one face. That's excessive, beyond excessive. I don't want to see that number increase in any way at all by next year. Yeah, no question about it. I do not want to see that number increase. I cannot be approaching 30 highlighters. No, I need to use some up or declutter some. Yeah. The next category is liquid highlighter. So we're still talking about highlighting sorts of products here. So not only do I have 26 individual pans of highlighter, but I also own liquid highlighters. And last year I had 4 liquid highlighters in my collection, which wasn't that bad. I felt like that was totally fine and reasonable and fair to have in my collection. This year I'm up to 5. I have one, I guess it is more of a cream. It's like a e.l.f. Dewy Stick, which is basically just like a clear balm. And I think that's the only one that's new to my collection. No, the Charlotte Tilbury one is also new to my collection. So I have that. I can't recall what 4 I had last year, to be honest. But anyways, 5 liquid highlighters or cream highlighters in my life is more than I need. 2 of those are minis. One is actually a deluxe size sample. The other is like a mini that you could actually purchase in a duo. And so maybe next year I can work those 2 out of my life, and then I'd be down to 3, and then it would totally seem much more reasonable for me. But yeah, altogether that ends up being 31 highlighting products, and that just is a lot. My next category is lip primer, and last year I had 2. One was a like mini from Bite, and the other one was a e.l.f. one, which I never use. I'm not really familiar with it. And this year, that's the only one that I have. It's a like double-ended e.l.f. lip plumper and primer. I never use it. I don't even know why I have it. I don't know why I felt inclined to ever pick it up. But yeah, I have one lip priming kind of product, and I don't really see the value in it. So that's probably something I'm gonna have to pan or declutter soon. And my next category is lip liner. Last year I had 6 lip liners, which I don't think is a really bad number. I think that's actually totally fair to have 6 lip liners, especially considering some are nudes, some are reds, some are like deeper colors. But this year, even though I think 6 is totally a manageable and realistic number, I'm actually down to only 4 because I haven't brought any new ones into my collection. I did declutter one, and I did pan and use up another one. And I'm happy where it stands. I don't really feel compelled to pick up any more lip liners for my collection personally. So 4 is great. I'm really happy with that number and foresee that definitely either staying the same for next year or decreasing for next year, because I do have one that's like a dark, dark brown and one that's like a dark, dark purple. And quite honestly, I forget to reach for them even when I'm wearing those sorts of lips, so I may end up decluttering them. We'll see though. And then the next category is lip gloss and tinted lip balm. I merged the two together because I kind of use them both in the same way. Last year I had 17 lip glosses and tinted lip balms in my life. I know 3 of which were blister packs, also by Buxom. So each individual blister pack is 1 lip gloss in my collection. This year I have used up 1 of those from that blister pack. I have 1 of them still open and 1 I have yet to open. And my current lip gloss and tinted lip balm number is down to 11 because I did declutter a handful and I've used up actually a couple this year as well. I'm really happy to see that number be 11, but there are a few that I can definitely see myself trying to use up next year and work my way through. Lip gloss is something that I've really only come to embrace and like love on recently within the last year, or maybe even just less than a year. So that number being 11 is totally cool with me. Even if I brought in 2 more full size and use up the 2 other sample sizes that I have, I'd still be okay seeing 11 next year, but I wouldn't really want to see it surpass that number. Now this one is really insightful. Liquid lipstick is the next category, and in 2019 I had 16 liquid lipsticks. And even though I have not used up any this year, I'm down to only 8 liquid lipsticks because I did declutter several from my life. I've just come to realize liquid lipstick is not my preference. It does not feel comfortable. I don't like the way that my lips look when I wear it. I do have a handful of really fun colors in my collection though, things that I really like and I do prefer in that longer lasting sort of formula. So having 8 liquid lipsticks is totally fine with me. I think that number is actually really good. I do have some shades that are maybe a little bit similar to one another in that type of formula, but I love brown lipsticks in a liquid lipstick formula just because of their longevity. And yeah, I definitely don't see that number increasing. I'd really hope to either keep it exactly as it is or see that number maybe come down a little bit. Bullet lipsticks, on the other hand, are a little bit more shameful. Last year I had 41 bullet lipsticks, which is just like so many. I have 1 mouth. Yeah, so 41 is a lot. And that being said, this year's number is not all that much better. I'm so happy to say it's not higher though. It is down to 35 bullet lipsticks, and that is even more than I need for sure because I don't wear a lipstick out in the world in any way, shape, or form anymore because I don't want to wear a lipstick underneath of a mask. I don't. So I really just tend to go without lipstick when I leave the house, and so I'm really only wearing lipstick when I film or sometimes when I want to just make my full look complete, but I don't really tend to reach for my lipsticks anymore, so 35 is very steep, and I'd like to either declutter some of those or work my way through some of those soon. The next category is liquid shadows, cream shadows, and glitter liners. I lumped them all together because I kind of use them all in the same sort of way. And so last year I had 9 products in that category. This year I don't have any glitter liners, but I just considered the category to be the same. I don't own any more glitter liners though anymore. I only have liquid shadows and cream shadows as well as cream shadow sticks, and I still have 9. That number has stayed the same even though I brought in the Charlotte Tilbury cream shadow stick, the cream pot, and then actually I counted it as 2 liquid shadows, the Elf and J Kissa to the rescue. I'll have to look back on the picture and kind of like reflect on what has come and gone from my collection. I'm very curious about that actually. I've managed to keep it the same even though I've brought in 4 different liquid shadow, cream shadow situations into my collection. I wouldn't mind having 0, like not having any of that category, because liquid shadows I just don't tend to reach for all that often, and cream shadows and cream shadow sticks, they just don't vibe with me. They don't work with my hooded eyes. They don't work with my oily lids. I just can't seem to get any of them to cooperate. So yeah, eventually that number could be 0 and I'd be okay with that, but I don't want it to increase. Definitely don't want that to increase. And then the next category is liquid/gel eyeliners. Last year I had 3, one of which was actually a gel pot eyeliner, but I decluttered that and I did use up one of the liquid liners that I had. So in 2020, now we're looking at 2 liquid eyeliners. I don't have any gel eyeliners in my collection. I have 1 brown liquid liner and 1 black liquid liner, and the black is nearly empty. So that's what I'm down to. I don't really foresee that number ever increasing beyond where it is. In fact, it might end up going down to just simply 1 because liquid liner just isn't my thing. I don't tend to like the way it looks on my eyes. I have a really hard time applying it. It just isn't really my fave thing. So that could definitely go down even farther, or at least stay exactly the same as it is. And I would be so happy with that. The next category is pencil eyeliners, and last year I had 12 products in that category, which is a lot because I really only use pencil eyeliner in my waterline like I'm wearing today. I don't tend to reach for it for any other reason, like as an eyeshadow base or on my lid. I don't tend to like line my upper lash line with pencil liner. So yeah, that number was pretty high. I did declutter quite a few of them from my collection this year when I did my declutter in the spring, because a lot of my older ones were from Colourpop and I kind of just collected them because they were fun colors but never really reached for them. That all aside, I am down to 8 pencil liners in my collection now. I'm happy with the ones that I have. I am considering decluttering maybe 1 of the ones that I currently have because I haven't reached for it since I did my last declutter. So that's possibly something that will come down. But if I keep it anywhere from like 5 to 8 pencil liners, I'd be okay with that number because I do like having some fun colors to play around with in my waterline. I just don't tend to go through my pencil liners very often or very quickly because I do reach for them for such a very small like surface area, and very, very infrequently do I actually use my pencil liner. So 8 is good. I'm happy with that. 12 seemed really substantial and 8 doesn't seem so bad. This next category gets a little bit kind of like hairy, the same way that the highlighter situation gets, and we're going to be talking about all my eyeshadows now. And it gets a little bit weird because things have kind of shifted, and I'll explain that. But last year, my singles, I had 41 singles. That includes individual pressed powder sort of pans, as well as individually like packaged pans. So the Colourpop Super Shock Shadows, for example. So I had 41 singles last year, and this year my number is up to 61. The reason why it's up to 61 is because I did depot 3 Colourpop palettes, which had 30 eyeshadows altogether. So if I really look at those as 3 individual eyeshadow palettes and add them to my palette number, which those are where those were housed last year, then I really only have 31 singles, which means I've gone down 10 singles because I did declutter a couple of my Super Shock shadows that were older. I did declutter a couple pressed powder shadows that weren't performing as well as I'd like them to. 30 eyeshadows that were in palettes before are now technically singles, and they're not going to make their way back into the palettes, I don't believe. I do still have the packaging, but I don't imagine myself putting them back into palettes. So I really do have 61 singles now. At least those eyeshadows are not all new. Like, I didn't bring 20 new eyeshadows into my collection. I just kind of reimagined where they belong in the numbers, or where they exist and how I kind of interact with them. So 61 single shadows is a lot, but it really is 31 singles and 3 palettes. Maybe I'm just trying to justify it more, but I haven't brought more eyeshadows into my collection. In fact, I have decluttered some of my singles. But eyeshadow palettes, I had 20 eyeshadow palettes last year. I have decluttered a few of them, and this year I did bring in a few new eyeshadow palettes to my collection, but I'm still only at 21 eyeshadow palettes. If I included those Colourpop ones, like I said, that I have now as 30 single shadows, I would have 24 eyeshadow palettes, and I don't think that that's terrible, but realistically, in the grand scheme of things, they are truly now singles. So we're gonna say I have 61 eyeshadow singles and 21 eyeshadow palettes. And honestly, I'm not mad at that number because I love eyeshadow. You know, I love doing my Pan Those Eyeshadows Project Pan. I love playing with fun, colorful eyeshadow looks. I'm always doing something interesting, and today is an exception to that rule, but generally I'm always playing around with eyeshadow, and I love trying out new formulas and palettes and just being inspired by color stories. So to see that number go from 20 to 21 is not bad, and all of the eyeshadow palettes that I've decluttered over this past year, I really made sure that I gave them to the right person in my life who can really get some good use out of them. So I'm not condoning just like decluttering in order to bring in new things, but the eyeshadow palettes that I did eliminate from my collection, they found really great homes, and I've been able to bring in eyeshadow palettes that I really love and really am excited to have as a part of my collection. So it works out in the end, in my opinion. In fact, I don't see myself decluttering any of the eyeshadow palettes that I have because I'm really happy with where my eyeshadow collection stands as it is, except I will be decluttering this one. I just filmed my Pan That palette update, and by the time that that project wraps up, I will be decluttering this, bringing me back down to 20 eyeshadow palettes in my collection. And there are no eyeshadow palettes that I have my eye on right now. In fact, I feel a little bit overwhelmed by my eyeshadow collection as it is, so I really want to just focus in on panning more eyeshadows for my collection and really getting some more use out of what I already own and not really increasing that number. So we only have 2 more categories remaining, the first one being mascara. Last year I had 6 mascaras. I don't really care how many mascaras I have, to be honest. I know a lot of people will be like, I have 1 mascara and I'll use that single mascara for the next 6 months or 3 months or whatever. I'm not like that. I have currently 4 mascaras, one of which is on its way, which is, again, from that Sephora birthday set. By the way, that's the only thing I got in the VIB sale. I got my birthday gift, and then I bought a gift for Christmas for my sister. So I did really well with that. But in any case, I have 4 mascaras, or I will shortly have 4 mascaras in my life, 3 of which are open. I'm totally cool with that. I'll probably open up the Kush one before I end up finishing up any of the other ones. I don't know what it is with me and mascara. I can't just commit to one. I can't have the option of just one for like 3 or 6 months straight. Just not feasible for me. I like having mascara options, and that's just what works for me. And then the last category is brows. And last year I had 7 brow products. I don't break this up between like pomade and brow gels and brow pencils or brow pens. I just lump them all into one because they really all offer different options, obviously different looks, but I just feel like they're one and the same. So I am now down to 5 brow products, which I'm really happy about. I think I decluttered one and then I used up one of my brow pencils, and I have brought in a couple, maybe 1 new brow product this year. Yeah, I think I've only brought in 1 new brow product this year, and I am really happy to see only 5 be my count. I imagine if I check in like 6 months, that number may still be exactly the same, but this time next year, I would imagine this number being a little bit lower, and I would be totally okay with that. I'm not buying any more brow pencils. I've just come to realize it's very wasteful for how fast I go through them, and I don't really feel the need to have them in my collection. And a lot of the time I can get away with just using a brow gel, or if I want something that looks a little bit more structured and more done, I can put a brow gel in and use any eyeshadow that is kind of a taupey sort of shade. So that number can definitely decrease, and I would be totally fine with it. And on that note, that is actually everything for my makeup inventory. It was a really good exercise to do this last year and then do it again this year, and it does take some time, but it was really nice to look into my collection and to see a lot of my numbers have gone down. Some have increased, some have remained kind of the same, but to see that through trying to be a little bit more conscientious as I'm bringing products into my collection and being more analytical and more critical of what adds value to my collection, it really has made a difference, and I'm seeing these numbers really make more sense for me, and I still feel like I have so much variety and so much more makeup than one face could ever need. So I look at these numbers and I'm really happy, but I definitely do see that there's progress that I can make. My makeup collection is relatively large, I think, for my personal preferences. I'm not saying that if you own more makeup than me, then it's excessive. I just mean for me and what I want out of a makeup collection and the options that I personally need, this is more than I need, for sure. But I'm happy with it, and I feel like I get tons of variety. I can create any look that I ever want to with what I own, and that is really special and that is really important to me. I love having variety. I love feeling like every time I put on makeup, I can do something totally different, and it's just a creative outlet for me. So I never want to be fully minimalist with my makeup collection, but I do want to just check in with myself and ensure that I'm not amassing tons and tons of products and just justifying it as a part of my hobby. I really do want to be very conscientious and aware and critical of what comes into my life. And this coming year, as I probably am going to be doing a pretty severe no buy, or like minimizing the amount that I actually bring into my collection, it will be really nice to potentially see these numbers go down and to really understand what it is that I need from my collection and versus what I want and what I think adds value to my collection, but I can actually see it if I go in a no buy and don't bring anything new into my collection and use what I have. Anyways, I'm getting rambly. I did in the intro, I did in the middle, and I did now, and I will not ever not be rambly in my videos, but that is absolutely everything for today's video. I hope that you enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching and for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye everyone.